Hola. Wow.
In a galactic council chamber, scientist Jumba is brought to trial for conducting illegal genetic experiments. He insists they were only theories, but soon, with pride, he reveals his creation, Experiment 626, a creature that's incredibly strong, resistant to fire and bullets, highly intelligent, and designed with one purpose: to destroy everything it touches. The council tries to talk to him, hoping to find even a trace of goodness, but Experiment 626 answers with violence. Jumba is arrested and called a stupid scientist. As he's being taken away, he shouts that he'd rather be called an evil genius than a stupid scientist.
The experiment is condemned to exile on an asteroid, but escapes during transport. It creates chaos on the ship, crawls through the ventilation ducts, and steals a police cruiser. It activates hyperspace and flees to an unknown planet, Earth. The council finds out it's going to land in Hawaii, an island on a planet mostly covered in water. Due to its density, 626 would sink into the ocean. But there's a bigger issue. Earth is a protected reserve by the Galactic Federation because it's home to mosquitoes, an endangered species.
Plickly, an Earth expert, opposes the use of force because humans are fragile and an attack would cause chaos. So the Grand Councilwoman decides to send Plickly along with Jumba, offering him freedom if he manages to capture the experiment. Meanwhile, in Kauai, Hawaii, a girl named Lilo swims in the ocean. She shows up late to her hula class, soaked and disheveled, and causes an accident as she walks in. When they ask her why she's like that, she explains that every Thursday she has to give a peanut butter sandwich to a fish named Pudge, because according to her, he controls the weather. That day, there was no peanut butter. Her sister suggested using tuna, but Lilo refused, offended. A classmate calls her crazy, and Lilo hits her. Even though she wants to stay and dance, it's already too late. The teacher calls her older sister, Nani, to come pick her up. The other girls laugh at her, and at her handmade doll, Scrump. Lilo, sad, throws the doll away and walks off. But a moment later, she comes back, picks it up, and hugs it, gently.
Starting now, we're getting ready to truly understand little Lilo, beyond what she seems and beyond what meets the eye. She's a 6-year-old girl who just lost her parents. Imagine what it must be like for a child to experience something like that. Her main attachment figures suddenly disappeared, and her entire family unit has been reconfigured. Lilo is dealing with everything she feels without yet having the words to name it. That's why she acts it out, projects it, or transforms it into rituals. The story of Pudge the fish tells us a lot about her inner world. Lilo believes this fish controls the weather, and every Thursday, she brings him a peanut butter sandwich. But something that many might not know, and we'll uncover it later, is that her parents died in an accident during a great storm.
That's why it's very important for Lilo to appease the fish that controls the weather. That ritual is her way of trying to regain control. Maybe if Pudge had received the sandwich that day, her parents would still be alive. Or maybe, if she keeps bringing him the sandwich, she won't lose anyone else.
In that gesture, there is trauma. It's a very childlike way of dealing with guilt, with powerlessness, or with the fear that life will snatch away something she loves again. That's also why it's understandable that Lilo reacted so aggressively when her classmate made fun of her. Her classmate unknowingly touched or even insulted the wound of her parents' loss. And that reaction showed us that inside Lilo, there's a lot of fury, a lot of anger that she doesn't know how or where to direct.
And I want you to hold on to this idea because I'll come back to it later to give you more details.
Also, through this interaction, we can understand why Lilo is excluded by her classmates. They don't understand her tastes and interests, her way of thinking, or the pain she's experiencing, and that's why they reject her and make fun of her. This happens when someone doesn't fit in with the group and is marginalized.
I want to tell you that this is very sad, but unfortunately, it happens all the time and everywhere.
And then we saw that Lilo threw her doll away, but then regretted it, picked it up, and hugged it. That reaction moved me a lot because I felt that Lilo saw herself in the doll.
The classmates despised the doll, and then Lilo threw it away, as if she also rejected it. But afterwards, she felt compassion for it because she recognized her own abandonment in it, and then she picked it up and gave it the hug she also yearns for herself.
When Nani arrives at school, Lilo is already gone. She runs back home just as Cobra Bubbles, the social worker, arrives to assess if Nani can take care of her sister. The situation gets tense. Lilo lucks herself in, and without knowing Cobra is already there, Nani shouts that she's going to bake her into a cake for the visitor. Inside, Cobra notices the stove is still on.
Then Lilo appears, and he starts asking her questions. Nani tries to signal what to answer, but Lilo misinterprets a gesture and says her sister disciplines her with bricks in a pillowcase, which worries Cobra even more.
A very serious Cobra gives Nani 3 days to prove she can take care of Lilo. Afterward, Nani and Lilo argue. Nani tells her she's a pain, and Lilo, hurt, replies that she should sell her and buy a rabbit instead. They both hurt each other with words and eventually scream into their pillows, each on their own. Later, Nani tries to make amends with a slice of pizza. Lilo, still hurt, asks if they're a broken family. Nani responds sincerely, "Maybe so, but that doesn't mean we don't love each other." Lilo tells her she likes her more as a sister than as a mom. Joking around, they reconcile. Lilo tells her she hit and bit a classmate that day. Nani tries to correct her, but Lilo complains that people treat her differently. They make a deal. Lilo promises not to fight, and Nani promises not to yell at her, except on special occasions.
Suddenly, Lilo sees a shooting star. She runs to make a wish. She wants a friend, someone who won't leave, the best angel she can have. That star is actually Experiment 626, crashing in Hawaii. To hide, he pretends to be a dog and ends up captured by animal control. The next day, Nani takes Lilo to a shelter to adopt a pet. When 626 sees her, he knows she's his chance to escape. He runs to her, greets her, and hugs her. Lilo feels something instantly. The staff warns them this dog was hit by a car and left for dead. But Lilo insists he's special. Nani, with doubts, agrees. Lilo names him Stitch.
Meanwhile, Jumba and Plickly are following closely, trying to recapture him without being noticed by the humans. Jumba tries to shoot Stitch from a distance, but when Lilo hugs him, Plickly stops him, reminding him that the child is part of the mosquito's food chain. Out on the street, Lilo sees her classmates riding their bikes. She approaches and apologizes for what happened in class, but her classmate doesn't accept the apology, and when she sees Stitch, she says he's the ugliest thing she's ever seen.
Stitch knocks her off her bike and rides off with Lilo. He travels all over the island looking for a way to escape, but finds nothing. He has no choice but to stay with Lilo, even though he keeps trying to run away. At the restaurant where Nani works, Lilo tells Stitch that his level of badness is way too high for someone so small. David, who also works there, wants to ask Nani out, but she turns him down, implying she's got too many responsibilities. Not long after, Jumba and Plickly show up in disguise and try to catch Stitch. He fights back and causes total chaos in the restaurant. The boss, seeing that Stitch is with Nani, fires her. Lilo feels guilty, but Nani reassures her it wasn't her fault. Back home, Stitch starts destroying everything. He bites things, breaks the linings, and defies Nani, who's starting to suspect he's not a normal dog. Nani wants to return him, but Lilo reminds her that they adopted him like an orphan, and then she tells her the meaning of Ohana. It means family, and family never gets left behind. That changes Nani's mind.
We've already talked about how Lilo, being a child who doesn't yet have the words to name what she feels, transforms her world into symbolic acts, ritualizing it like in the story of Pudged Fish, or projecting it like in the scene with the doll. With Stitch, Lilo connects because she sees a lot of herself in him. He's different, an orphan, nobody wants him, and he doesn't belong anywhere, just like her. But also, as Lilo herself said, Stitch has a badness level that's quite high for being so small. He has destructive impulses, reacts with violence, breaks things, bites, scratches, and lets out wild screams. And Lilo understands that rage. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of anger inside Lilo that doesn't know where to go. An anger that spills over at times, making her hit her classmate, argue with Nani, and scream. It's a part of her that maybe even scares her, or makes her feel guilty.
Think about it. Stitch is a creature with a cute appearance, but full of chaos. A being that destroys without thinking and responds with aggression to the slightest threat. But at the same time, he's someone who's lost, who doesn't understand why he's here, doesn't know how to behave, and just wants to belong. And that's Lilo too. In that sense, helping Stitch calm down with patience, with tenderness, and with love is also her way of doing the same for herself. When you help another person deal with their chaos, you're often learning to deal with your own.
In the room, Stitch keeps breaking everything. Lilo looks at him and says he always destroys, then asks, why don't you try doing something different? So Stitch built a cardboard city, like San Francisco, only to act like a monster and destroy it all over again. From afar, Jumba watches and mocks him. He says Stitch was created to destroy, and he'll never be able to change that. But then he notices something. Stitch has nothing left to destroy, and he was never given another purpose. Jumba pauses and wonders what it would be like to live without one. In that moment, Stitch picks up a book, The Ugly Duckling, and asks Lilo to read it to him. She explains how the duckling was sad because he was alone, but then his family found him, and he was happy because he finally had a place to belong.
The next day, Cobra Bubbles shows up at the house after finding out that Nani lost her job. Just as she's trying to explain, Stitch throws the book at him. Cobra gets angry and warns Nani she needs to find a job immediately, and next time he visits, he expects Stitch to behave like a good citizen. Now, it's worth acknowledging Nani. Lilo isn't the only one dealing with the loss of her parents. Nani is grieving too. She's also carrying enormous pain. But unlike Lilo, she doesn't have space to express it openly.
Being so young, barely out of adolescence, she's had to take charge of a situation no one prepared her for. Overnight, she stopped being a sister and became a mother, responsible for the well-being of a child who is also broken. She has to care, contain, work, face authorities who question her ability to be a guardian, and still find a way to support herself. It's easy to judge her mistakes or her impatience in certain moments.
But she's doing the impossible with the little she has, both economically and emotionally.
She also lost her parents. She's also scared, but she can't afford to break down. So acknowledging Nani is also a way of acknowledging all those people who, without having finished growing up, have been forced to take on roles that were never meant for them, to become the support for someone else. People who, in the midst of their own pain, have done the impossible to keep the ones they love from falling apart.
While Nani is out searching for work without success, Lilo tries to turn Stitch into a model citizen, using Elvis Presley as inspiration. She teaches him how to sing, how to dance, how to behave, but Stitch just can't seem to adapt. At the beach, he puts on an Elvis show. At first, everyone enjoys it. People laugh, take pictures, but when he's overwhelmed with cameras and flashes, he loses control and attacks. From a distance, Cobra Bubbles watches, clearly disappointed.
From a different perspective than the one I've been giving to Lilo, many people have interpreted her as a neurodivergent character.
In fact, over time, she's become a kind of icon for many people, both within the autistic spectrum and across other neurodivergent profiles, because it allows for that kind of reading.
One of the traits most mentioned is her intense and specific interest in Elvis Presley.
Even Lilo seems obsessed with him. In people with autism, it's common to have very specific topics or areas of interest that, on the outside, might seem strange or exaggerated.
Another important aspect is how Lilo manages her emotions. When she gets frustrated or feels threatened,
She can react with great intensity, as we saw in the scene where she attacked her classmate.
In many neurodivergent profiles, especially in autism, it's common to have difficulties regulating emotions,
which can lead to explosive responses when anxiety or frustration exceed a certain threshold. There's also her attachment to routines and rituals, like the one with Punch the Fish. Lilo follows this ritual with absolute seriousness, and when something interrupts that routine, she gets distressed. This kind of need for structure and repetition is also common within the autistic spectrum.
We could also mention even more elements. But it's also true that not everyone who watches the movie interprets Lilo as a neurodivergent child.
From another perspective, like the one already proposed here, she's simply a child who doesn't fit in and is deeply hurt by the loss of her parents.
This perspective is also valid, as many of her behaviors can be explained by the emotional impact of grief and trauma.
Neurodivergence is not the only possible interpretation, and not everything that deviates from what is expected has to fit into a diagnosis.
Furthermore, not all people with intense interests or who are rejected by others are neurodivergent.
Some are, others aren't. Human behavior is complex. It doesn't always have a single cause or a single way of being understood. And that doesn't diminish the value of any interpretation or invalidate the experience of those who see themselves reflected in Lilo from one place or another. The important thing is this: Lilo represents those who don't easily fit the mold, who relate to the world in a different way, who experience very big things inside small bodies. Whether from a neurodiversity perspective or from a story of exclusion and loss, Lilo is a figure in whom many people see themselves reflected.
And that's why they remember her, understand her, and love her.
David tries to cheer them up and takes them surfing. For a moment, everything seems to be going well. Stitch has fun in the water with Lilo and Nani. Even though he can't swim, he throws himself in again and again because he's starting to feel like part of the family. But then, Jumba and Pleakley find him, and in trying to capture him, they cause an accident. Lilo nearly drowns, Stitch sinks, and it's David who rescues her. Cobra witnesses the entire scene. Worried, he tells Nani he'll be back the next day to take Lilo away. Alone, David looks at Stitch and says, "I always believed Lilo and Nani would make it, until you showed up."
Sad, Lilo and Nani return home. Stitch watches them as Nani sings to her sister before bed. Lilo shows Stitch a photo of her deceased parents and tells him they died in an accident while it was raining. Then she asks him about his, saying she's heard him cry at nights and believes that's why he destroys things and pushes her away. From my perspective, the scene is deeply important because it supports the interpretation I've been developing, that Lilo sees her own fury and aggression reflected in Stitch when she asked him about his parents and suggested that not being with them makes him break things or lash out. She was actually speaking from her own experience.
She assumed that because that's what she has felt and also what she has done.
Lila tells them that her family is small and they don't have many toys, but if Stitch wants, he can join them. They'll teach him to be good. She also tells them that if he decides to leave, she'll always remember him because she never forgets those who leave. Stitch, feeling out of place, walks alone into the forest with the ugly duckling in his hands, quietly repeating to himself, "I'm lost." Meanwhile, Jumba and Pleakley, after failing their mission, are fired and decide to catch Stitch by force. Stitch begins to understand what it means to have a family, something he was never created for. His destructive nature starts to clash with this new, fragile desire to belong. Lilo is sad about Stitch leaving. Nani tries to comfort her, and just then, David shows up with good news. He found a job interview for Nani. She leaves with a bit of hope and asks Lilo not to open the door for anyone.
One of the things I like most about this movie is the way the relationship between Nani and David is portrayed. David is clearly interested in her, and she's interested in him too. But David never pressures her to be together. He fully understands that Nani is going through a very complicated time and can't afford to be in a relationship right now. She just lost her parents. She's fighting not to lose her sister. She has to work, find income, face social services visits, and carry a responsibility that overwhelms her. And David, he gets it.
And instead of getting frustrated or pulling away for not receiving what he wants, he supports her and stays by her side without being intrusive.
In a world where affection is often conditional, I'll help you if you reciprocate, or I'll be with you if you give me what I expect. No, David is there, even if he can't receive what he wants at that moment. He's there because he cares, because he's a good person.
Sometimes the most generous thing you can do for someone you care about is to ask nothing of them and stay without expecting a reward, as David is doing.
When Nani leaves, Stitch returns to the house, but he's not alone. Jumba is right behind him and starts firing his laser. Chaos erupts in Lilo's house. Lilo grabs the phone and desperately calls Bubbles to say that aliens are attacking her. Pleakley, overwhelmed and terrified, tries to stop Jumba, but everything spirals out of control. Meanwhile, Stitch runs around with a chainsaw, swinging it like a toy, crashing into walls, furniture, anything in his path. Then it gets worse. Stitch and Jumba start tossing a plasma gun back and forth. It's unstable. It's about to explode. Pleakley sees what's coming. He grabs Lilo and runs. And just in time, the house explodes behind them. The fire draws firefighters to the scene. And Nani, who was walking home excited after a promising job interview, finds her house in flames.
Cobra, seeing what's happening, decides that Lilo can't continue living there. Despite Nani's desperate pleas, he separates her from her sister. But Lilo escapes, running into the forest. Stitch, affected by everything that's happened, finds the family photo among the remains and goes after her. When he finds Lilo, he shows her his forearms, revealing he's an alien. Lilo, hurt and overwhelmed, tells him to leave. Before they can say anything else, Captain Gantu captures them in a net. Lilo is locked up like a prisoner. Stitch escapes just before the ship takes off. Nani sees him and confronts him, demanding to know where her sister is. Just as he's about to explain, Jumba catches him again. Nani insists on answers. Finally, Jumba and Plickly admit that Lilo is taken by Gantu, but say they can't do anything.
When all seems lost, Stitch approaches Nani and says a word that changes everything, Ohana. Nani remembers, Ohana means family, and family never gets left behind. That's enough for Jumba. Reluctantly moved, he decides to help. With Nani and Plickly, they set off on a mission to rescue Lilo. Meanwhile, Gantu contacts the Grand Council woman to report his success, but he's interrupted. Stitch bursts into his ship, launched by the explosion of a tanker truck. In the middle of the chaos, Stitch fights Gantu, defeats him, throws him through the air, and rescues Lilo, keeping his promise not to leave anyone behind. Back on Earth, the Ground Council woman arrives to take Stitch away. He asks to say goodbye, and in front of everyone, he says, "This is my family. I found it myself. It's small and it's broken, but it's good." Then Lilo, smart as ever, shows the legal adoption papers. Stitch is hers. Taking him would be stealing. Bubbles, who we now learn was a former CIA agent, confirms it. The aliens respect rules. The Ground Council woman agrees. Stitch will serve as exile on Earth, and Lilo and her family are placed under the protection of the Galactic Federation.
Chaos is left behind. Stitch truly becomes a part of them. In the final scenes, they're rebuilding their home together, laughing, sharing simple, happy moments. And in the very last image, a new family photo captures it all. Stitch, finally smiling, in his new home.
Lilo and Nani's family had broken after their parents' death, and both were going through many difficulties adapting to their new reality until Stitch arrived.
And that family that was broken slowly ended up uniting. And the curious, or perhaps most beautiful part, is that his name, Stitch, refers to the thread that mends what's been torn.
Stitch arrived like a seam in the middle of a torn fabric and was the one who ended up uniting this fragmented family and all these ideas of sewing, of joining what is broken.
This refers to the Japanese art of Kintsugi. When a piece of pottery breaks, our reaction is usually to throw it away and replace it. But in Japan, there is a very different way of looking at it.
Since Kintsugi is a technique that consists of repairing broken objects by filling their cracks with gold. Instead of discarding the object, they restore it, highlighting its fractures, and the result is a new, different piece marked by its history.
But even more beautiful than before. This practice has transformed into a whole philosophy of life that values the beauty of imperfections, both in objects and in people.
The beauty is in the history, in what's behind it, in what was broken and yet kept going. Stitch was that for Lilo and Nani, that stitch that united them and transformed them. The family remained small, remained broken in some aspects, but it's good, and that's what matters. Life doesn't have to be flawless to be beautiful. Families don't have to be complete or traditional to be good.
They don't have to look like the movies to be true. Sometimes the most valuable thing is that which was broken and yet was not given up on. And with just the right stitch of love, it can become something stronger and more beautiful than before. If you're one of those who made it all the way to the end of my psychological analysis, thank you so much for watching the full video. I truly appreciate it, and I'm grateful for your support. And just a reminder, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do it now. It would really help me out. And you'll also make sure you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. That's it for now. You and I will see each other in the next one.